I'm so curious if you think it's possible for like young writers to come up and like make a living in today's world.
They all rely on freelance writers to provide content for them. And I think the reason I've been successful in the past 3 years is because of this network.
This is Philip Van Nostrand, and you are listening to the Epic Freelance Life podcast. How to make more money and live an epic freelance life. All right, welcome back. We are here talking about how to live an epic freelance life with Stephanie Cain. Stephanie, why don't you say hi and introduce yourself?
Hey Phil, how's it going? Thanks so much
Great.
for having me. I'm a freelance journalist, so that's what kind of brings me here today to talk just about navigating the publishing landscape, being a content strategist, and probably weddings too. So, in
Yeah.
my career, yeah, as a freelance writer, I cover mostly lifestyle topics, but I write a lot about weddings and a lot about wine. So, those are two of my favorite topics.
Wedding and wine, the two W's. When I met you, you weren't a full-on freelance journalist. What you've had a couple career paths, I think, in the past 10 years or whatever. Can you tell us a little bit, just a little like where you came from and where you are now?
Absolutely. So I've been a journalist, I would say, for almost 15 years now.
Oh,
But like your traditional idea of a journalist, you work for a publication. So I've worked as an editor at publications that you would see in the checkout aisle at the grocery store back when we had print magazines.
mm-hmm.
So Wine Spectator, which is a wine magazine, Elite Traveler, which is a luxury lifestyle magazine for people who own private jets. So that was
Okay.
a fun one.
That's awesome.
And also The Knot, the wedding magazine, which is
Hmm.
how I met you. And then I've also worked doing content strategy for e-commerce brands. So a lot of tech kind of startups here in New York City in the early 2010s when there was a bubbling startup scene and tech sector here in the city. So
Cool.
while I was working in some content strategy, I was also freelancing on the side here and there, including writing about weddings for Brides magazine, which
Mm,
was cool. And so, I kind of got tired over a decade of being in an
yeah.
office.
Yep.
And as a writer, you always knew that freelance writer, freelance journalist was an option for you. The
Okay.
way that publications are structured is that they all rely on freelance writers to provide content for them.
Yeah.
And it was intriguing to me for my lifestyle at the time. And I had always kind of in the back of my mind thought I would want to do that one day. And so about 3 years ago, I decided to go full time freelance, which brings me to living my epic freelance life.
Yes. Okay. I love that. So now I want you to brag a little bit. What are some of like the notable names that you're writing for these days? And what are you proud of?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm proud of a lot of things that I do, but I would say that the four main places that I contribute to pretty regularly currently are the New York Times, Brides, Fortune, and VinePair, which is an online wine publication. Super cool. Everyone should check it out.
Awesome. And yeah, that's so cool. I think it's like I don't know. You are living what many people dream of trying to do by coming to New York. Like writing for the New York Times regularly and writing for Brides or these like wine magazines. I think it's amazing. Um, did it feel easy or hard to get to where you are now? And there's no right answer to this question.
I would say both, actually.
Hmm.
Maybe a little bit on the harder side of things, but there's kind of an outside force that has always made it a bit more of an uphill battle as a freelance journalist. So the publishing industry, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware, has just been on the decline for the entire 15 years that I've been in this industry and
Yeah.
even prior to that. And there's been some steep kind of cliff sides that it's fallen off, like in
Yeah.
the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. And then last year with COVID, just budgets being slashed, teams are, tons of journalists are being laid off across all different
Yep.
publications. They used to be these, magazine mastheads used to be dozens and dozens of people, and now it's kind of a skeleton crew. And so it has
Yeah.
made it more challenging, I would say, than maybe being a freelance journalist back in the heyday of magazines,
Sure, sure.
40 years ago.
Well, yeah, and that's been, yeah, it's so interesting because you're right. It's an industry that is like starving to death basically, or like slowly disappearing. But somehow you are making a living off of it. And so how is that even possible? Like, yeah, how do you make money? That's what I want to know.
Well, so being a freelance journalist kind of works in two ways.
Hmm.
You can either pitch ideas to an editor at a publication, and they can say, yes, this is something that we would want to include in our coverage, or no, hey, try again another time. The other way is that you are kind of, regularly contributing to a publication where they want to send you assignments.
Yeah,
And that's because you've built a great relationship with that editor. They've worked with you before. They know that you do good work, and they know that they can count on you to write X number of articles each month, or whatever
yeah,
kind of the cadence is. So those are the two big things. And I would say that one thing that's helped me a lot is to have a mix of those, right?
yeah.
I absolutely love coming up with story ideas. That ideation part of it is something that is very exciting to me, but it's also a lot of work for maybe not getting any payoff. The number
Okay.
of times I've sent off five, six ideas well thought out that maybe took me hours to put together, and to have them all be a no, or you just don't hear
Mm,
back from someone is the absolute worst. And
yeah,
so, by having some that are always assignments, is I can kind of count on a certain amount of income and a certain amount of work every month. And then
yeah.
from there, I can determine how much I really want to be pitching.
That makes sense. Yeah, and so I have a travel writer friend. She's kind of from the old school life as well, and I think she had the same thing. She had an agreement with, it might have been Fortune even, or Forbes Travel actually, to like to just write 3 articles a month, no matter what. And I think it was like she was on contract with them basically. So is that what you're describing? Like having a contract sort of agreement to write out X amount of articles a month, and they pay you X dollars. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think some are officially contracts, and other times it's just kind of an unsaid, hey, you're my go-to person
Okay.
on this topic. Expect this. This is what we're kind of doing, or you just
Oh.
fall into a rhythm that you know that it's going to kind of come along. So I think it works both ways.
And is it easy for you to just like come up with articles every month? For some reason that feels really hard for me, but that's not my job obviously. So, um
I will say
yeah.
before the pandemic, and when we were, out and about seeing people all the time, it was
Mhm.
actually pretty easy, because you might have a 3-minute conversation with someone and it would spark an idea. Or you would
Oh,
go to an event and you'd be observing what's going on in the world.
yeah.
Or you would be at a conference like Engage, and someone would stand up on the stage and tell their story or explain their opinion.
Mm,
And it might even just be an example that they gave while they were supporting their argument that they're making, and it would just be a light bulb in my head, and I would think, oh, that's a great story idea, let me write that down. But I would say being at home is a lot harder to come up
yeah.
with story ideas, because it's not just naturally happening. You have to really go out of your way to try to find it.
Yeah.
And so
You're
that's been a really interesting
yeah.
learning experience for me in the last year.
That's that's funny. You're basically experiencing a lot less life right now, sort of, right? Like in the outside world. And so, yeah, that's interesting. So there's a lot less random ideas that are coming your way. You really have to like work at it, or I guess go out of your way to talk to a lot of people, like and then see what comes up. But it still must feel different. I want to know. So, part of living an epic freelance life for me is sort of having the freedom, one, to be my own boss and travel, or like travel and work, or work and travel. And I know that you and your husband love to travel, and so I kind of want to know, maybe, where was the last place you'd been? I think you were traveling really recently. Right now it's March 26th, 2021. I want to know where you've been and where you are going next.
That's a good question. So, what we've done, I guess we started last year, in late summer was the first time that we did a little getaway because the numbers were so low here in New York City.
Hmm.
And we've been going to the Catskills, we went to the Poconos, we went to the Berkshires, and we're staying at all these kind of cool like boutique hotel properties.
Hmm.
And I keep joking that it's like Brooklyn chic in the mountains
Yeah,
outside of New York City
I know
because
exactly what you're
these
describing. Yeah.
yeah, they have a vibe. They're almost all these, couples from New York City that have
Yep.
put together these beautiful properties and kind of turned them into these little just escapes that are all 2 hours. They're all drivable from New York, and it's just a breath of fresh air to put it literally when you go out to these like more rural destinations. We're just kind of hanging out on the property. They have really good food. You can read by the fireplace for the wintry ones that we have gone to.
I love
So
that.
I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, I'll tell you the three favorite that we did though.
Okay, great.
We went to this place called the DeBruce. And their parent company is the Foster Supply Company, and they have a few different properties kind of scattered around the Catskills. But their food was amazing, absolutely amazing, like blew my mind. And it was the first time that we, really eaten in a restaurant also in months. And so to be sitting
Uh,
there and having someone serve you a tasting menu where you didn't have to make a choice, you didn't have to cook anything, you didn't have to do the
yep.
dishes.
Yeah,
I felt like I had died and gone to heaven, to be
that's so funny.
honest.
You are traveling, even having a kid, and sometimes you travel with your daughter, and sometimes you don't. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's nice as parents though to get a little bit of a break. I
Yes.
think that previous to the pandemic, my husband and I were out and about enough with like work sort of engagements or to see friends during the week that we felt like we had a little bit of distance from her, like it's
Yeah.
nice to just have a break and not think about taking care of your child for 2 hours or whatever it is. And then obviously being homebound because we never left New York City during the pandemic, and we didn't see anyone. So we didn't even see my in-laws who do kind of take care of our daughter at times, and so it's been nice to be able to take a step back away and let her have some alone time too. I think she likes it when she's not
Yeah.
hanging out with us.
That's awesome. I love all that. Okay, so on these little excursions, are you on full vacation mode or do you work and play at the same time? Like, are you writing while you're out there, or are you like, I don't know, taking ideas or interviewing people, or are you just like pure escape?
That I guess that's been another change with the pandemic. I
Hmm.
guess the pandemic has changed everything. Before, we would go for 2, 3 weeks at a time to whatever destination we were going to, because we'd be flying there usually, and we'd rent an apartment or Airbnb a lot of times, and we would just work from there. We would get up in the morning, we'd find a local coffee shop or like a cool nook in the place
Mm,
we were staying, and we would each work, and then the afternoon and evening we would go out and explore the destination.
oh,
And that was a
cool.
really yeah, that was a really really good schedule that allowed us to kind of get some things done as well as be in another place and not feel like it was work 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 at home, and then when you leave it was only play. And
Yeah.
then it also allowed us to travel more often because we could work from wherever we were. I guess it's a bit of like that digital nomad lifestyle.
Yeah, I
uh,
love
but
that.
but since the pandemic and we're not going away anymore really, and these getaways are just for a long weekend kind of thing, like a Friday to Sunday or Thursday to Sunday, I've been trying to just decompress,
Okay.
not take my computer, not hang out on social media, not be
Hmm.
posting anything. I just really tried to like take my books and magazines and chill out and just relax. And I think that the places that we've been picking really
Hmm.
promote that as well.
I'm so curious if you think it's possible for like young writers to come up and like make a living in today's world. And what would you say? Like, could anybody be a journalist?
I feel like in my writers groups, this is such a topic of
Yeah.
conversation. Anytime someone drops in there and says, "Hey, I know this person in college and they're looking for an internship or they want advice on starting out," and the natural reaction from everyone is just like, don't do it. um,
Yeah, that's what I
because the
figured.
it's definitely really challenging today, and I think that it's not necessarily challenging to find outlets to write in. They definitely still exist, and maybe they're not your traditional glossy magazine, or even a major heritage newspaper, but
Yeah,
lots of other sites are popping up. There's a lot of content marketing style work that you can do with brands, but you know the the fees that some of these companies are offering, it,
yeah,
it just means you have to do so much work to be able to kind of pay your rent and
sure.
your electricity bill kind of thing. And I would say that when you're younger too, you don't necessarily have this like massive Rolodex of people and contacts and just anyone that's going to pass along your name to kind of get in the door at certain places. And so I do think that it's not impossible, but I think it's so much more challenging for someone starting out today than
Yeah,
even when I started out. I think the reason I've been successful in the past 3 years is because of this network of people in publishing and content of all forms across, all of New York City and beyond that I've built up. And when I've worked with these
yeah,
people for maybe 7 to 10 years, it's really easy for them to refer you because they know the quality of work that you do. And it's a little harder to have that kind of trust
yeah.
marker if you're on the younger side
Of
of
course.
things.
So I mean, but yes. So what you're saying is like your success is built on like your network and the relationships that you cultivated over 15 years. Um,
I mean, I
yeah,
definitely think that that's a huge part of my ability to freelance
of course.
successfully today.
But like
Absolutely.
there can't be a world where there's no new writers, right? Because eventually like this generation will die out and then what's next? So well, there has to be new writers, and I want to know maybe like what kind of personality should they have if they want to succeed in this kind of like cutthroat industry.
That's a really great
Do you know what I mean?
question.
Because there's some young kid from NYU is going to graduate and like and pursue this no matter what. And I want to know like who you think it is that's going to succeed as a freelance writer, because it's such a hard job to make a living in, even just like photography almost. But like, but yeah, but there has to be something that's going to work, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course. I mean, I think that, one option is to definitely look for staff jobs at different types of
Hmm.
publications and companies that have robust content programs. I think that that's one of the best ways, because then you're gaining your clips, you're gaining experience, you're meeting people, but you're also getting a regular
Got it.
paycheck. And I think that that's really, really
Okay.
helpful. And in like a similar vein, you can also be a freelance writer and have a day job that's something else entirely. I do know people who work in other elements of marketing or business, but they love writing. And so they do that, in their own personal time.
Hmm.
And it might not be full time writer, but they're still able to kind of scratch that itch and like be a part of it and build their clips while again still having like a regular paycheck,
Hmm.
because that's the absolute like worst part of this business. I mean, even myself, it's just like you never quite know the next. And I think probably for you too with photography, you don't necessarily like know so far in advance what you're going to be making, and so you're kind of always like stashing money into savings just to carry you like should another pandemic come out of
Yes,
nowhere and everyone cuts their
that's funny.
budgets. But yeah, so I would say like those kind of tips, and I think someone being really like smart with their savings and money and understanding finances is really important if you're going to kind of do any sort of entrepreneurial um, project where there are unknowns about being able
Yeah.
to get paid and pay your bills and feel like you're successful in that way as well as being successful in like achieving the creative goal that you want within that whatever that career is.
Hmm. That's
Does that
great.
make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And so, my big takeaway from what you're saying is basically, yeah, starting at something that's like sort of secure, but that allows you to build relationships. Like I forget what you called it, like an agency or some sort of. Um,
Well, just like a
A
staff
staff
job,
job. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So like you're an employee somewhere, right? So like go look for
yeah,
editorial assistant positions at
yeah.
magazines or websites. Work in even companies like Goop and these
Oh
other sort
yeah,
of lifestyle e-commerce brands that they have content as a part of it. I mean, even Airbnb has a
yeah.
magazine, and of course they're only featuring anything related to Airbnbs. They're definitely not writing about luxury
Mm,
hotels, but it's still great
yeah.
experience that's going to help
That,
you no matter what you
yep.
do. And then you can feel more comfortable to launch freelance a little later on when you feel like you've been
Yeah.
established. Because one of the things actually that everyone looks at, and myself when I was an editor as well, and I was looking at hiring freelance writers, is they want to see your portfolio.
Mm.
And you have to put that together. It can't just be your like musings in a Word document from high school or
Yes,
college.
that's so right.
They need to be actually published pieces. So, college newspapers are a great place for that. When I was an undergraduate, I wrote a ton for my college newspaper just to get experience,
Mm.
just to get those clips. And that was really helpful for me in my beginning jobs
This
as
is such
well.
solid advice from a New York Times writer. I appreciate this so much. And yeah, you're right. You're right. And I also think like being in staff positions like that, like hopefully you're around other people, but you start to get to know like who's who and what people are doing and where people are going and what's interesting. And it also just will tell you a lot about like what kind of people you want to work with or like what kind of topics are interesting to you, and because not everything is right. And so writing for group, you will definitely be like writing about specific topics for a specific demographic, and maybe that's like exciting, or you'll find out really quickly that that's like not where you want to be, and all of that is information like from just doing it in the real world. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think that, as at least as a journalist now, I mean, I'm not talking about creative writing here, but, when you're writing about nonfiction
yeah,
topics, including journalism, and or like working for a brand is having a specialty is definitely really helpful, and that can be a topic specialty such as I mentioned that I write about wine and
yep.
weddings, but it's also a technical specialty. I mean, if you are able to do some of the unglamorous type of writing, understanding SEO and how to maximizing
Mm,
traffic, um, UX copywriting on websites. I mean, doing the things like the call to action buttons that say buy
yeah.
now, or the UX copywriting, the metadata, like all of that. I mean, I think even sometimes those writers are more in demand
Oh,
these days
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
than, someone that knows a lot about wine because, there's a lot of people that know a lot of stuff about a lot of things.
yeah.
And so any way that you can differentiate yourself as well by like, gaining skills in a couple different areas
I
is
love that.
also super
Yeah,
helpful.
that's like recognizing your passion and just going like leaning super deep into it, I think is probably extremely beneficial. Um
Yeah, I mean, I always followed like the things that I loved, to engage. I mean, I guess I was always a lifestyle person. I always knew I wanted to be in
yeah.
lifestyle and maybe write about fashion or like home design or food. But nowadays it's like everybody is looking for healthcare writers.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, darn, I should have been a healthcare writer. Like, science writers, like just everybody
Yeah.
wants them right now. And before that, it was all about tech, like tech writers, people who were like up in like
Mm,
who's who in Silicon Valley and had connections at venture capitalist
yeah,
firms and these incubators that were trying to produce the next Apple or Facebook or Instagram or
exactly.
whatever. Um, so I think that it's important to kind of know what you
Yep.
like and but also pay attention to what the market is looking for and maybe try to find a middle
Yeah,
ground.
or know what you like, and then like if you like wine, there's still a way to relate wine to the coronavirus pandemic. You just have to like it takes a little like mental exercise, but I'm sure there's tons of topics there as well, like impact on the wine industry or how like subscription sales have gone up for wine lovers and all that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of ways to stay relevant, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're so business minded, but I think you pretty much just said what I
Oh,
was going to
good.
probably say next is I noticed that, while I'm still in lifestyle topics, I definitely went from writing the kind of articles that are say, five rosés to drink this
Sure.
summer at a picnic to being much more of a business
Mm,
story. So I would say that the majority of my writing that I do now is a business angle at these industries. Like the wedding industry, for example, is worth $80 billion in the
Yeah.
United States. I mean, there's a lot happening there. That's nowhere near the let of like 2 trillion that the
Okay.
technology industry is worth. But 80 billion is
Yeah.
still hefty, and it is something that touches a lot of different people. Because a lot of people get married in their life,
Yeah.
and so I found that there's a lot of stories like hidden in there if you're willing to kind of dig
Mm.
into it.
I love that. Yeah. So wise, Stephanie. So I want to know if you. This is like a funny question, but I want you to be honest. Like, is this the life that you want? Are you living the life of your dreams, or is there a little bit? Is there more of a dream out there for you?
I would say I'm definitely working on the life of
Yeah.
my dreams for sure. Since I knew that being a freelance journalist was always an option, and the ability to kind of make your own hours, to seek out the good stories, to spend weeks investigating something if you wanted to do it, to be able to travel, to um, be a parent where you could see your kid during the day and not feel like, well, I left at 8 in the morning and I came back at 7 or 8 at night and my kid's now asleep and I saw them for
Mm,
15
yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
I knew that I was always very attracted to this idea, right? Because there's so many positives in it. Um, I don't know if I'm quite there yet with exactly where I want my business to
Hmm.
be, in terms of like the success of it, but I am definitely down a pathway that is very, very
Yeah. So
exciting to
so
me.
t- tell me and be honest. Like, what's next for you, or what other goals have you not met yet? And I also have like goals that I'm striving towards as well. So like, yeah, I would expect that, I guess. But where do you want to be next in your career?
So I think that I want to always be pushing myself and expanding what I do. I don't really like to get too comfortable, which is
Yeah.
why I think I've never been suited for any sort of job that took place in an office.
Got it.
um, I'm like, okay, what's next? What's next? I've done this, check the box. Like, what am I doing next? So I think that there's one part of me that's, oh, there's other publications that I want to write for. I'd love to have a byline in this place or
Mm,
that place. And then the other part is expanding just my own kind of technical knowledge of what I'm doing. So I want to do a little bit more content strategy and working with either private companies or publications to kind of help out in that capacity as well. It's something that you do get to do a little bit of when you work on staff somewhere, but as a freelancer, you don't necessarily take part in that unless you are kind of hired in a consulting capacity to do something like that. So I would love to have some of those kind of projects because I noticed that my day was feeling really one sided. Like it's all just like interviewing people and writing words. And I wanted to kind of utilize other skills that I have and then kind of break up the day so it feels like more exciting to me.
my question was: is there a dream
Okay.
company in there that you're describing, like a dream company that you'd
Um,
love to work with?
I have some, but I'm not going to
All
tell.
right, I knew you weren't going to tell me. I had to ask. Um, all right. Well, I hope that those.
I can't give away all of
All
my
right, all right.
secrets on a podcast.
I'm sure your dreams will come true, and you're incredibly ambitious and well connected. So like, it won't be long, I think, before you're doing exactly what you want there. So that's cool. I'm curious about how you approach this idea too. You already said that you've been doing this for about 15 years. So do you feel like there are phases of a freelance career? Like would you break your 15 years up into like fives or threes or anything like that, or has it just been like one kind of blurred process for you?
Hmm. I would say much of it is a blurred process because, I was working on staff as an editor at publications and companies, and then freelancing here and there on the side in
Yeah.
different subjects that I really enjoyed. For a while, even though I worked at a full-time job, I was a freelancer for People magazine in the
Mm.
evenings, and I would go be one of those like red carpet reporters, like hang
What?
out with
This
the
is
paparazzi
amazing.
when like the
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like when like the Gossip Girl cast were like the biggest people and they'd be attending some like store opening and I was supposed to get a few quotes from them to see if we'd use it in the magazine or go to Fashion Week and like see who would show up at a fashion show back when, this was all happening at Bryant
Yeah.
Park. And like I was doing those kind of things too, right? So it was just like a creative outlet for me
Mm.
and it was fun and it was helping me build clips. And I also for years freelanced for, and actually still do. I just wrote a piece for them for a trade publication in the gourmet food industry called Specialty Food, and I absolutely love it. I feel like I find out about these products years before they ever hit the
Cool.
shelves in Whole Foods, and then when I'm shopping for my groceries and I'm like, hey, I totally remember that kombucha brand when the girl was telling me she was like making it in her basement.
That's awesome.
And like now she's like on the shelves. So there were those kind of little
Yeah.
moments, but it is mostly a blur. But I would say the last 3 years, I have approached a little bit more tactically in terms of, okay, year one, this is what I want to do. Year
Mm.
two, this is what I want to do. And like all the way, I wanted to give myself a 5 year
Okay.
plan, which I'm still working on, obviously, because I'm in year three and the pandemic definitely shifted things a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think the answer to your question is both. But I also think that when I was starting out, I didn't think about it in a business
Yeah.
capacity. I don't even know if I had taken a business class at that point to be able to even put together what my like loose business plan would
Sure.
be for Stephanie Kane, the writer. Whereas, doing it in my 30s, I had more knowledge of how to actually make that successful and put it down on paper and say, here are the
Yeah.
goals and here's what I want
Well,
to achieve at the end of it across a couple
totally
different
makes
categories.
sense. And I'm, my question isn't even like, did you have a plan? It's a little bit more um esoteric, I guess. Like for me, I feel like I've been doing this for 13 years now, and I want to say like the first 5 years felt like a really like a building phase for me. I was like building relationships, building my website, figuring out my pricing and branding and all this stuff. And then the second 5 years were like sort of establishing myself as an authority a little bit more, or like figuring out my position. And so I wonder if you've like, it sounds like there was like an early phase for you of the writing career where you were kind of doing like the glitz and the glam. And then I wonder if there was a time like after a few years of that where you sort of settled into like a niche, and then now you've like transitioned onto your own. And so it sounds like you've had some natural phases throughout this process, I think. And I'd be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say any of it was
Yeah,
intentional. It was definitely
exactly.
like, hey, okay, here's what's going on in the world right now. What's another good opportunity? And I would like take it
Cool.
at the time with the end goal of like still striving to be kind of like the best writer editor I could be and would love to like head any sort of content team in the
Mm.
future. It used to be I want to be an editor in chief of a magazine. That job is now translated to like head of content. The same
Yeah.
idea, right? So that was always the end goal, but the pathway to get there was like, you've probably seen those graphs and people think it's just like this uphill line to get to your goal, but it's actually like
Yeah, yeah,
squiggly,
yeah,
scraggly,
exactly.
going every direction, like intersecting back with itself. I mean, I definitely think that's been my life. It's just like this googled up mess, but like it's definitely this momentum is going in one
That's good.
direction.
Yeah, I could see that for you as well. It's always, it might be squiggly, but it's still kind of heading upwards. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
cool, Stephanie. This is great. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about, but I'll end it kind of on maybe my last favorite question. What is something interesting that you've read, listened to, or watched lately that you'd love to share with the readers?
You love
I
this
do. I think
question.
it's, yeah.
I remember I remember going to your house pre-pandemic when you had that get together of a bunch of cool
Oh,
people
I
that
asked
you
the
knew,
exact
and then
same
you posed
question.
that
You're right.
question to the
That's
group.
funny.
Yes, you did. But I like it. That's a great question. I feel, I had this conversation with a friend of mine recently, and we both love reading a lot of books, and we love to get really nerdy
Mm-hmm.
about our books. I mean, we want to read the Pulitzer Prize
Mm-hmm.
winners and these nonfiction books about all different types of subjects, and heavy books like about the tragedies of the world. And we were like, all I want to read is like chick lit. I need like an escape
Yeah.
right now. And I noticed that in even my Netflix, I was, let me watch Emily in Paris, like let me watch
Okay.
Bridgerton.
Got
And
it.
like So really, really fluffy stuff. But I will say I have read a couple really excellent books. I read and I a book called Pappy Land, which just came out, I think,
I've
right
just
before
heard of this
Christmas.
recently. Yeah.
And it's the story about Pappy Van Winkle bourbon in Kentucky, and the family has been through lots of ups and downs with this brand and reinvention, which is a lot of people don't know it because when they hear Pappy Van Winkle, they think, "Oh my God, that's thousands of dollars for a bottle for this like
Mm.
whiskey. Like why?" And so it was really cool to kind of get into the story of the family, but I really respected the book for the writing.
Cool.
The author is a journalist named Wright Thompson. I don't know him, but now I
Hmm.
want to. He is a beautiful writer, and the way that he's put together the profiles of the main person that he's featuring from the family in the book was just, I loved it. Like I wish I could write that beautifully of a profile
Mm.
about someone. I felt like I was taking writing notes as I was reading it. And I want to find more and more of
Yeah.
his work. I know he's done a lot of profiles for ESPN magazine about sports figures, which I was like, if you are writing how you took this style of writing and applied it to something
Yep.
like sports or drinks, it's very
I
fascinating
love
to me.
that.
So I liked it for
Yeah,
both reasons, and that was a real standout for me.
that's such a great way
Yeah,
to love a book. I really enjoy what I would call like delicious books, where like the sentences are interesting and tasteful, and that's so great. Okay, great recommendation, Pappyland.
yeah. Can
Give
I
me
give
one
you
more.
one
Yeah,
more?
besides
Only
Bridgerton
because
and
okay.
Pappyland.
Oh, no, but and I had lots of problems with
Okay,
Bridgerton, by the way, so I don't
got
really
it.
recommend that to anyone. But I did read, since I mentioned that, a good friend of mine that we always trade book recommendations. She told me about this like very fun, chick lit style book called The Kiss Quotient,
Hmm.
and I read it and I loved it, and I was just so impressed because I think that that genre of book is very prescriptive. It kind of follows the same main character with the same problems, just in slightly different
Mm-hmm.
settings. And this one completely flipped the genre on its head. And I don't want to give away too much about the book, but it tackled a lot for what would be a book, marketed to women as a fun beach read. So if that's kind of your style and you're looking for something that's really going to change it up, then definitely check out the Kiss
Awesome.
Quotient.
That's
But
perfect.
yeah,
Thank you. This is so good. I think we're just gonna end it right there on a happy note, and I'm excited to see what your career brings you in the next 5 to 10 years. I know it's going to be amazing, Stephanie. So I'm happy I know you, and thanks so much for coming on and chatting.
oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to know you too.
Yay! Have a beautiful day.
You too.